The airport, a hub of departure and arrival, symbolized a gateway to countless destinations. Yet the lack of any recorded travel under Richard's name implied either a well-orchestrated plan to cover his tracks or a deliberate attempt to mislead the investigation. It was as if he vanished into thin air, leaving behind a vehicle that served as a silent witness to his final known actions. Had he intentionally disappeared, or had something more sinister happened? Let's dive in and find out. Sometime during the 1980s, Richard Hoagland met and married Linda Eiler, forging a bond that seemed unbreakable. They settled in Indianapolis, Indiana, and were blessed with 2 sons, Matthew and Douglas. Their life was the epitome of suburban bliss, marked by laughter, a luxurious home, and exotic vacations. However, beneath the surface, Richard began to withdraw, his behavior shifting inexplicably, which raised concerns among those closest to him, especially his wife, Linda. Initially known for his outgoing and engaging personality, he unexpectedly began to withdraw from family life and social interactions, a stark contrast to the vibrant person he once was. His demeanor became increasingly quiet and reserved, hinting at an internal struggle or profound stress that he kept concealed. The once lively atmosphere at home was now overshadowed by Richard's uncharacteristic mood changes and secretive actions. The day Richard vanished marked the culmination of this erratic behavior, and on February 10, 1993, their ordinary life was shattered. In an uncharacteristic and alarming move, he left the house under the pretense of needing urgent medical care, opting not to wait for Linda, which only added to the mystery of his actions. Moreover, he left his young son, Matthew, at home alone for an entire day, a decision that was not only out of character, but also went against his typically responsible demeanor. After Linda's workday ended, her world spiraled into massive confusion. No hospital had any record of Richard. The house was in perfect order, yet Richard had vanished without a trace, leaving behind his coat despite the freezing February weather. The mystery deepened when Richard began making cryptic phone calls. These calls were characterized by their vague and mysterious nature, leaving more questions than answers. During these conversations, Richard expressed a strong desire to escape his current life, indicating a deep sense of dissatisfaction or distress with his circumstances. He also voiced fears of imprisonment, hinting at possible legal or financial troubles that might have been haunting him, though the specifics remained unclear. Richard's manner during these calls was notably abrupt and guarded. He seemed cautious, perhaps wary of revealing too much or leaving traces that could lead to his whereabouts. The calls were brief and often ended suddenly, leaving Linda and the family in a state of confusion and concern. Each call peeled back a layer of the mystery surrounding Richard's disappearance, yet the snippets of conversation offered little in terms of clarity or closure. The discovery of Richard's car abandoned at the Indianapolis airport added a perplexing twist to his mysterious disappearance. The location of the car suggested a possible intention to travel, yet the absence of any travel records only deepened the mystery. This inconsistency raised numerous questions about his intended destination and the motives behind leaving his car in such a public and strategic location. The authorities and Linda faced the daunting task of deciphering this clue. Did Richard meet someone at the airport? Was he traveling under an alias? Or did he never board a flight, instead using the airport as a diversion? Richard's disappearance tore through the fabric of what appeared to be a stable and prosperous family life, unveiling a hidden financial catastrophe that was as shocking as it was devastating. The revelation of a mountain of debt, consisting of numerous maxed-out credit cards and a slew of unpaid taxes, shattered the illusion of security and stability that Linda and her sons had so long cherished. This financial ruin wasn't just a set of numbers on paper, it was a betrayal, a stark unveiling of a double life led by the family's supposed patriarch. Linda, who had shared her life with Richard, trusting in a partnership that was meant to be her safe harbor, found herself navigating a tempest of deceit. The debts, a silent testimony of Richard's hidden life, were like chains pulling her and her sons into an abyss. The credit cards, once just mundane pieces of plastic, now loomed over the family like specters of ruin, each statement a reminder of a trust broken, a life upended. Faced with this daunting reality, Linda's resilience was put to a severe test. Not only did she have to grapple with the emotional turmoil of her husband's betrayal and disappearance, but she also had to confront the legal ramifications that came with the financial disaster he left behind. The process of filing for divorce was not just a legal formality. It was a painful, tangible acknowledgement that the life she had known was irretrievably broken. The divorce proceedings forced Linda to sift through the debris of her marriage, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to take on the arduous task of disentangling her life from Richard's shadow. The emotional aftermath of this ordeal was complex and multifaceted. Linda found herself in a relentless cycle of shock, grief, and anger. Each uncovered receipt, each overdue notice was a fresh wound, a stark reminder of the enormity of Richard's deceit. The burden of unpaid taxes added another layer of complexity to her plight, entangling her in a bureaucratic nightmare that seemed to have no end. The financial ruin was not just a blow to Linda's present, it threatened her and her son's future. The once secure educational plans for Matthew and Douglas, the aspirations for a stable and nurturing home, all seemed to hang in the balance. Linda had to muster all her strength, resourcefulness, and courage to shield her sons from the worst of the storm, to preserve a semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos that Richard had left in his wake. The family, once united, was now fractured, their sense of security and normalcy irrevocably altered. Linda's world gradually morphed into a chilling maze of suspicion and dread. The initial shock of Richard's abrupt departure and the subsequent financial debacle evolved into a pervasive atmosphere of paranoia that infiltrated every aspect of her life. It wasn't just the financial ruin that loomed over her, it was the unnerving sensation of being constantly watched, the eerie feeling that every step she took was being monitored by unseen eyes. The strange occurrences that began to unfold only served to heighten Linda's anxiety. She noticed peculiar patterns, unfamiliar cars lingering near her home, faces in crowds that seemed to appear too frequently to be coincidental. These mysterious followers, always at the periphery of her vision, turned public spaces into landscapes of fear. The world outside her door, once familiar and safe, transformed into an arena of potential threats, each stranger a possible spy in a life that felt like it was no longer her own. The crescendo of this creeping terror was the discovery of a recording device attached to her phone line, a blatant invasion of her most private conversations and thoughts. This chilling find was not just a violation of her privacy, it was a tangible representation of her worst fears. It confirmed that her life was being dissected, that her words were not her own, and that her family's sanctuary had been compromised. This breach of security was a clear signal that the threats she felt were not just figments of her imagination. They were real, and they were dangerously close. Driven by an instinct to protect her children and herself, Linda made the heart-wrenching decision to retreat into hiding. She uprooted her family from the life they knew, seeking refuge in anonymity. This drastic step plunged them into a world dominated by shadows and secrecy, where every new acquaintance was met with suspicion, and every decision was influenced by the imperative of staying hidden. The burden of constant vigilance weighed heavily on Linda. She bore the responsibility of safeguarding her family's safety and sanity, all while navigating the psychological minefield that her life had become. The stress of maintaining this facade of normalcy, of ensuring that her children felt secure even in the midst of turmoil, was a relentless challenge. Yet, amidst this turmoil, Linda's resolve never wavered. After what seemed like an eternity shrouded in silence and cloaked in the unknown, a glimmer of truth pierced through the darkness in 2016. The monotony of Linda's life, now punctuated by the persistent echoes of Richard's absence, was abruptly interrupted by a phone call. Detective Anthony Cardillo, a name previously unknown to Linda, became the harbinger of revelations that would unravel the meticulously woven tapestry of Richard's deception. The detective's voice, brimming with the gravity of his findings, conveyed the unimaginable. Richard, the man Linda once vowed her life to, had been masquerading under the stolen guise of Terry Szymanski, a persona crafted with cunning and sustained with the sorrow of another. The story that unfolded was one of calculated betrayal and a duplicitous life that Richard had crafted in the sun-drenched locales of Florida. It was there, in the unsuspecting embrace of a new community, that Richard had exploited the grief of Edward, Terry Szymanski's bereaved father. Feigning empathy and companionship, Richard had woven himself into the fabric of Edward's life, only to pilfer the identity of his deceased son. With this new identity, Richard erected a facade of normalcy, a new chapter built on the ruins of the lives he left scattered in his wake. But the facade was not merely a superficial veneer, it was a complete transformation. Richard, or Terry as he was now known, didn't just assume a new name, he embodied a new existence. He remarried, not as a continuation of his past life, but as a cornerstone of his new one. In this alternate reality, he fathered a child, a symbol of the life he had meticulously constructed, a life anchored in deception, yet experienced with the authenticity of everyday normalcy. He became a respected member of his new community, his new identity entwined with acts of camaraderie and instances of everyday neighborliness. To the world, he was Terry Szymanski, a husband, a father, a friend. But beneath the surface lay the truth of Richard Hoagland, a man who had vanished, leaving a wake of confusion and heartbreak. Richard's new identity as Terry Szymanski was ultimately uncovered due to the curiosity and diligence of a family member of the real Terry Szymanski. The real Terry's nephew, while browsing through Ancestry.com in 2013, stumbled upon records indicating that Terry Szymanski, who was supposed to have died in 1991, appeared to be alive and well in Florida. The nephew found a pilot's license issued in Terry's name, which was particularly alarming since the real Terry had passed away 2 decades earlier. This discovery was unsettling and raised immediate red flags for the nephew. Despite their concerns, the family hesitated to come forward immediately due to fears that the imposter, if confronted, might react negatively or even violently. It took 3 years for the nephew to muster the courage to approach the authorities with his findings. Once he did, law enforcement took the lead. Detective Anthony Cardillo of the Pasco County Sheriff's Department was assigned to the case. He delved into the records and, armed with the information provided by Terry's nephew, paid a visit to the individual living under Terry Szymanski's name. Upon confrontation, Richard, living as Terry, initially attempted to maintain his assumed identity. Richard pretended to be unaware, insisting vehemently to everyone that he was Terry Szymanski. However, when presented with the death certificate of the real Terry Szymanski, his facade began to crumble. Further investigation led to the discovery of the briefcase in the attic containing Richard's real identification documents, conclusively proving that the man who had been living as Terry Szymanski was, in fact, Richard Hoagland. This sequence of events, sparked by the observations of a vigilant family member and pursued by thorough law enforcement investigation, ultimately unraveled the double life that Richard had been leading for over 2 decades. Richard Hoagland's transformation into Terry Szymanski was not just a change of name, but a complete reinvention of life itself. After vanishing from his life in Indiana, Richard ventured into the sunny vistas of Florida, where he stumbled upon the identity of Terry Szymanski, a deceased fisherman whose existence would provide the perfect cover for his new chapter. Terry had died 2 years prior in a tragic accident at sea, a fact known only to his grieving father, Edward. Richard, exploiting Edward's sorrow, seamlessly inserted himself into the elderly man's life, gradually gaining his trust and access to Terry's personal documents. Once in possession of Terry Szymanski's death certificate, Richard embarked on a meticulous process of identity fabrication. He used the document to obtain a birth certificate from Ohio, which then allowed him to acquire a driver's license in Alabama. This domino effect of deceit culminated in Richard obtaining a Florida driver's license under Terry's name, the final piece in his elaborate masquerade. In his new guise, Richard, now Terry, did not merely exist, he thrived. He wove himself into the fabric of the community, his new identity an intricate tapestry of lies and half-truths that he presented to the world. As Terry, he remarried, welcoming his new wife into his life with the same charm and charisma that had defined his past. Together, they built a life that, to any onlooker, would appear utterly ordinary and unremarkable. They settled in the town of Zephyr Hills in Pasco County, where Richard, as Terry, became a familiar and respected figure. Richard's life as Terry was marked by a series of calculated normalcies. He took on various jobs, bought properties to rent them out, and even obtained a pilot's license, a testament to the thoroughness with which he embraced his new identity. He fathered a child, weaving yet another human connection into the web of his created life. To his neighbors, his friends, and even his new family, Terry Szymanski was a real person with a history, hopes, and dreams, a narrative Richard crafted with meticulous care, all the while hiding the reality of his past life and the family he had abandoned. But Richard's life as Terry was more than just a facade of normalcy. It was a carefully constructed fortress, each brick laid with the precision of someone who knew the price of discovery. He used his new wife's social security number for all their taxes, ensuring that his paper trail remained minimal. His life was a delicate balance, a constant dance between the man he used to be and the man he had become. In this duality, Richard found a semblance of peace, a life unperturbed by the chaos he had left behind. Richard believed to be impervious to the past. In the end, Richard's life as Terry Szymanski was a testament to the lengths to which one man would go to escape his past, and the fragility of an existence built on the sands of deceit. In the aftermath of this revelation, lives were forever altered. For Linda and her family, the closure came tainted with the bitterness of betrayal and the sorrow of lost years. For Richard's new family, the shock of discovering the man they knew as a husband and father was someone entirely different, was a betrayal of their trust and affection, leaving them to grapple with the reality that their cherished memories and shared experiences were intertwined with a lie. Once everything was revealed and Richard's double life was exposed, he faced immediate legal consequences. Detective Anthony Cardillo, after confirming Richard's true identity, took him into custody. Richard, who had been living as Terry Szymanski for over 2 decades, was arrested in July 2016. The charges were serious, as he had not only assumed the identity of a deceased person, but had also crafted an entire life around this stolen identity, including obtaining official documents, marrying, and even fathering a child under the false name. Initially, Richard might have hoped to face charges related only to identity theft, but the situation was more complex. He had left behind a family in Indiana, a wife and children who had suffered not only from his absence, but also from the financial turmoil he had caused. The revelation of his true identity brought a flood of emotions and legal repercussions, not only for him, but also for the families he had impacted in both his lives. It was clear that Richard's return to his original identity would not mark a return to normalcy, but rather the beginning of a complex legal battle to address the consequences of his choices. In the aftermath, both families, the one he left behind and the one he created under his assumed identity, had to grapple with the complex emotional and legal aftermath of his deception. The case of Richard Hoagland serves as a stark reminder of the far-reaching and long-lasting effects one individual's choices can have on the lives of many. Join the conversation. Drop a comment to share your thoughts and insights. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating content. Thanks for tuning in to Really Unreal. Join us next time as we uncover another fascinating case. Stay curious, stay connected, stay with Really Unreal.